Hi, my name is Janet Collins, and I am the Director of Spiritual Growth at Lakeside Church. If you are watching this video, then that means you have joined a small group, and I am excited for you. Small groups are such an important part of our spiritual growth. They are a great way for you to get connected, feel a sense of belonging, be in community, build deeper relationships with others and with God. Our big God-sized dream for small groups at Lakeside is that every regular attender would not just sit in a row on Sunday mornings and attend church, but they would also sit in a circle through a healthy small group. Small groups are one of the backbones of Lakeside Church. They are part of Lakeside Kids, Lakeside Youth, and Adults. They come in all different formats: regular small groups, Alpha and Alpha courses, Celebrate Recovery and Support groups, and task groups. The vision statement for Lakeside Church is a community helping people to discover and fully follow Jesus. Small groups are a key part of that process. As a small group ministry, our vision is to help people of all ages discover and fully follow Jesus by being involved in a healthy small group, helping each other grow in spiritual maturity in the areas of fellowship, discipleship, serving, outreach, and worship. When it comes to growing in your spiritual journey, it is important to regularly reflect on where you are at personally in each of these 5 key areas of fellowship, discipleship, serving, outreach, and worship, and where you need to grow. The tool that is going to help you do this is called the Spiritual Health Assessment. This is not a test that you pass or fail. It is a tool, a 1-page assessment that will help you see what your areas of strength are, share them, and celebrate them. As well, it will help you see what is your next step for growth. What is one thing that you can begin to work on that will help you fully follow Jesus on a deeper level? In our time together today, I want to look at each of these 5 areas and talk about what they are, ideas for growth in each area, and share examples. Hopefully this, along with the assessment, will stir in your heart which area you feel God is calling you to take your next step in. For every person, it will be something different and at a different level. This is not something you compare with others. It is something you as an individual decide where you are at. You are only looking at developing 1 or 2 goals you want to work on. And as you grow in those areas, then you may be ready to add something new later. It is a journey, 1 step at a time, so don't get overwhelmed. So let's look at our first area of fellowship. Fellowship is about our relationship with others. How open and honest are we with others about who we are? Do we feel like we have a deep, meaningful connection with others at Lakeside? Are we able to receive advice, encouragement, and correction from others? Is there anything in our relationships that is currently unresolved? Do we regularly use our time and resources to care for the needs of others? Do we gather regularly with a group of fellow believers for fellowship and accountability? Perhaps joining this small group is your first step in doing that. And this is your goal, to be consistent in coming. One of the areas I've been challenged to work on over the last 6 months has been vulnerability. I struggle to share deep personal things with others because of being hurt in the past. One of my goals has been to take more risks in this area in my relationships. I look for opportunities to share something a little deeper in my conversations with others I have a trust relationship with, and then reflect on how I feel about it after. This continues to be a challenge for me, but I have seen growth, and it has become easier to share, and I've been much less fearful in doing so. The second area is discipleship, learning the Word of God and living out its truth in every aspect of our lives. This is what discipleship is all about. Discipleship is growing to be more like Christ. It is about experiencing God's presence in our lives on a consistent basis and living out our faith on a daily basis in every situation. There are many things we can work on in our lives that can help us grow in becoming more like Christ. Tithing, fasting, prayer, Bible reading. We have to be careful, though, that our Christian walk does not become a checklist of things to do or accomplish. It is a relationship. The third area is serving. Being engaged in serving or volunteering and meeting the needs of others is so important. God has gifted each one of us in very unique ways, and we have been given these gifts to use to help those around us. What are your gifts and passions when it comes to serving? What do you get excited about? Children? Youth? Building something? Visiting people? Gardening? Cooking? Where are you currently involved in serving? In the church? In the community? In your neighborhood? There are lots of opportunities everywhere to volunteer, and if you need help finding the right place for you, talk to your small group leader, or you can contact me. Serving is not just an action, but it is also an attitude.
It was about 16 or 17 years ago that Jim Lowe came to me and said that God was leading him to start a leadership ministry for men, and asked if I was interested in joining. I said yes. After 9 months of intense study, we were ready to get started with leading small groups as a result of our training. My first group, I had 16 guys. Some of them were definitely more qualified than I felt I was to be leading our group. However, as I gave leadership to the group, they were a great help to me. As time went on, I started leading smaller groups of men and became more at ease. These last couple of years, I have become way more comfortable and excited about meeting one-on-one with the men, dealing with their questions and helping them with the needs in their life. God has been so good because in the beginning, I would sit in the back and not be able to share my stuff at all, now that it has all changed. I have a mentor, Jonathan, and Jim is still a help to me. We all need someone to walk with. Colossians 3:23-24, whatever you do, work at it with all your heart, as working for the Lord, not for men, since you know that you will receive an inheritance from the Lord as a reward. It is the Lord Christ you are serving.
The fourth area is outreach. We have a mission to introduce the world to Jesus, especially those in our circle of influence. Again, if we consider our vision statement, helping people discover and fully follow Jesus, how do we do that? For many of us, the idea of sharing our faith can be a scary idea. But what if you look at it more from the idea of sharing stories of things that have happened in your life and giving God the credit? That seems a little easier. As someone who works in a church full-time, one of my biggest challenges has been building relationships with people who don't know Jesus. I have to be very intentional about doing this.
I found many things to be helpful, but I'll mention a couple. First, to burst my bubble. Several years ago, I invited a dear friend to come with me to an evangelism training course at Lakeside because of a need that she'd expressed in this area. I mostly went to be helpful to her, but I realized almost immediately that we had opposite problems. She had a ton of non-Christians in her life, but didn't know how to talk with them about Christ. I had a lot of experience in sharing the gospel message, but since moving to Guelph between one thing and another, and for the first time in my Christian life, I'd gotten myself into a bit of a Christian bubble. I had only one non-Christian friend. As a result, my big action point from the course was to prayerfully get intentional about meeting and developing relationships with non-Christians, and making sure that I had space in my life and schedule to do that. I got more selective about some of my Christian activities, and among other things, through a unique serving opportunity, I got connected with a number of tapestry weavers. As I learned a new craft and art form, I all of a sudden had lots of non-Christian friends and lots of opportunities for very natural, gospel-centered conversations. My interests and activities have shifted over the years, but I still try to remain very intentional about developing relationships with non-Christians that could go beyond the superficial, and strategically using common elements such as activities and interests. A second thing is recognizing that out of fear, like, what is she gonna think of me? And what if he asks me a question I don't have an answer for? I can make it harder than it actually is. There are lots of resources available for getting better at the questions and answers part. Courses, books, Christians we can shadow who are a lot better at this than we are. But I frequently ask God to help me see beyond the surface of the person to the felt need, one that I often share with that individual. And once I see that common need, like the need for intimacy or a need for significance, a desire for success, a desire for justice, things like that, it makes it a lot easier to just share my story of my own need, of learning how Jesus met that need, and more. And opening up my life, just a bit or a lot, to show how Jesus continues to meet that need on a daily basis. Yes, I want to continue to get better at listening, at telling my story succinctly and with authenticity, and get better at preaching the gospel to myself, which is actually a bit of the starting point, which helps with that authenticity, but also enables me to better respond to some of the tougher issues and questions. But it's helpful for me to remember that gospel-centered conversations are in the end conversations between two people who share common needs and desires, even if it's not always evident on the surface. And because of that common ground, I can offer, for instance, to pray on the spot for someone I recently met in my building after bumping into her in the hall and realizing she was really upset about something. She's not a believer yet, but says that she was amazed that I would pray for her. Or at the family cottage, I can share with my non-Christian niece something that I just read in my quiet time in Job, and have a wonderful discussion with her about suffering and about not very helpful comforters. I can have a meaningful and heartfelt discussion with someone in my knitting group about what I think it means to be human and how that relates to current events and issues. I can share a cool answer to prayer with another, and with another share in a painful moment about recognizing yet again how much I still need to be transformed by Jesus in my attitudes and actions so that I become more like him. And I can help a young U of G student sort out some questions he has. He approached me actually out of the blue in Williams Coffee Pub when he saw that I had my Bible out. I was doing an assignment for a phenomenal course that I was taking in Perspectives in World Missions. And he'd been fascinated by the transformation in the life of a classmate who apparently had become a Christian recently. And for some reason, without ever meeting me before, decided that I was a good person to bring some questions to. Jesus changes everything. That's a reality I'm still learning for myself, and it's a message I can and want to share with others.
The final area is worship. Many of us, when we think of worship, we think of music, but that is just one aspect of it. Worship is anything that brings pleasure to God. It is about experiencing the presence of God. The heart of worship is surrendering to God, putting him first in every area of our lives. This is not just a one-time decision. Sometimes it's daily, hourly, or even moment by moment. But when you consider how you are doing in the area of worship in your own life, think about some of these questions. Do you regularly meditate on God's Word and invite him into your everyday activities? Do you have a deep desire to spend time in God's presence? How do you live your life in a way that demonstrates God is your highest priority?
I first came to Lakeside almost 25 years ago to worship. And I was immediately attracted to the worship style, the teaching, especially the music. However, as I've continued to grow in my faith, I've come to see worship as so much more. Worship begins with a realization that God is reaching out to me in a loving embrace. So worship is my response to reach out to return that embrace. Privately, it's incorporating an awareness of the presence of God into the everyday rhythms of the life. This can happen through listening to worship music while shopping, cooking, or washing dishes, or an inspirational message from Janet on a CD in my car as I'm driving. In these private moments of prayer, reflection, and ongoing conversation with God, I'm always learning new ways of knowing God. For example, in my current season of life, I'm involved in many building projects. As I labor down on my creaky knees, sweat and sawdust in my eyes, I'm mindful of Jesus' first ministry as a carpenter who no doubt sacrificed his physical comfort to the service of others, to understand their needs, to solve their problems, to provide them with shelter, and to transform and beautify the spaces of their lives through the works of his hands. As a carpenter, he lovingly shaped and transformed and created masterpieces. And did it all with no power tools. I mean, come on, no reciprocating saw, no impact driver. That is a labor of love. Worship comes both from knowing God and being fully known by him. So worship is both a window into God and also a mirror that reflects ourselves. It's the amazing realization that the one who knows me the best loves me the most. Yet with that realization, simultaneously, comes a recognition of my own shortcomings. For example, being a carpenter requires inordinate patience, and putting this into practice reveals my own woeful inadequacy in this regard. So, worship is a window into the heart of God, a mirror that reflects our own hearts back to us, and a door that leads us out into the heart of the world. C.S. Lewis in The Weight of Glory writes, "There are no ordinary people. You've never talked to a mere mortal." worship is recognizing God's workmanship in everyone we meet and encounter during a day. James reminds us in James 1:27 that worship is to include looking after orphans and widows in their distress. In short, loving others as we are loved by God. By grace and through grace. And showing love to others when they least expect it and least deserve it.
When it comes to growing in your spiritual journey, it is important to regularly reflect on where you are at personally in each of these 5 key areas of fellowship, discipleship, serving, outreach, and worship, and where you need to grow. The Spiritual Health Assessment is a great tool that will help you do that. At this time, I would like to invite you to spend some time talking in your small group about each of these 5 areas. The question for each of us is, what is our next step for growth? Which of these 5 areas is God calling you to work on over the next few months that will help you fully follow Jesus on a deeper level? You're only looking at setting 1 or 2 goals you want to work on that are measurable and accomplishable. When you are ready, I encourage you to share your goals with a trusted friend or a member of the group that can ask you how you are doing with your goal, encourage you, and pray for you. I love small groups. I think they are the key to our spiritual growth and development. God designed us to live in community. We all long for that sense of knowing others and being known for our true selves. It is my hope and prayer that as you begin your small group together, as you work on these 5 areas of fellowship, discipleship, serving, outreach, and worship, you will find yourself further along in your spiritual journey of discovering and fully following Jesus.